What's happening, everyone, and welcome back to Media. I genuinely think Avengers Age of Ultron is one of the more underrated MCU films. Now, before anyone starts typing angry comments, no, I don't think it's as good as the first Avengers movie. In fact, I would rank it as the weakest of the 4 Avengers films. But that's exactly why I think it deserves more credit. Because whenever people talk about Age of Ultron, they often make it sound like it's one of Marvel's biggest disappointments. And honestly, every time I revisit it, I struggle to understand where that criticism comes from. So while it may not reach the heights of the original Avengers, I think it's a far better movie than its reputation suggests. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy movie reviews, rankings, and all things cinema, consider hitting the like button and subscribing. It genuinely helps the channel and make sure that you don't miss any future reviews. Right, let's talk Avengers Age of Ultron. When this movie was first announced, I could not wait. I remember sitting in the cinema for Age of Ultron, and my excitement was actually higher than it had been for the first Avengers film. Because by this point, Marvel had already proven they could make an incredible team-up movie. So the question wasn't, can they do it anymore? It was, can they do it again? The Avengers was one of those rare films that completely delivered on the hype. Seeing Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye together on screen was something comic book fans had been dreaming about for years. So, naturally, the question became, how do you follow that? And from the trailers alone, I could tell Marvel were taking a different approach. Everything looked darker. The music felt more sinister, the imagery felt more unsettling, Ultron looked genuinely creepy, and there seemed to be a greater sense of danger hanging over the entire movie. So, let's get this out of the way early. Is Age of Ultron as good as the first Avengers movie? No, I don't think it is. Because when I watch this movie, I still see most of the things that made the first Avengers work so well. The character balance remains excellent, every member of the team gets their moment, and the relationship between them continued to evolve in a really natural way. One of my favourite aspects of the movie is how much more competent the Avengers feel as a team. They've clearly been working together for a while, and there's a confidence in the way that they operate that wasn't there in the first film. The action seems bigger, the stakes are higher, and on top of that, James Spader delivers a genuinely memorable performance as Ultron. The only 2 major areas where I think the film fails and falls short compared to its predecessor are that Loki is still a better villain, and the overall story is definitely messier. The biggest issue is that Age of Ultron often feels like it's carrying the weight of Marvel's future plans. It's introducing Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, it's introducing Vision, it's expanding the Infinity Stone storyline, it's teasing future events, and it's laying the groundwork for several major MCU movies that follow. None of these ideas are bad individually, but when you combine them all together, the film can occasionally feel overstuffed. The first Avengers had a very simple objective: stop Loki. Age of Ultron is trying to do a lot more, and while it's mostly successful, you can definitely feel the strain at times. But despite that, I still think it's a highly entertaining Avengers movie. One thing I absolutely love is that the film wastes absolutely no time. The opening sequence immediately throws us back into the action as the Avengers launch an assault on a Hydra base in order to retrieve Loki's scepter. It's a fantastic opening, and you immediately get to see the team operating like a well-oiled machine. Cap and Thor are combining attacks, Iron Man is flying circles around everyone, Hulk is smashing through bunkers. It all feels exactly like what you'd expect after the events of the first movie. These heroes have been working together for a while now, and they're far more effective because of it. We also get the introduction to Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, better known as Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Now, this is a bit of comic book industry trivia, but it's actually a shame that the movie couldn't fully embrace their comic book origins. At the time this film was made, Fox still owned the movie rights to the X-Men franchise, and the term mutant was tied up in those rights. That's why Wanda and Pietro are referred as enhanced individuals rather than mutants, which is one of those strange situations where legal agreements behind the scenes affected the storytelling on screen. Thankfully, that situation has obviously changed now, but it does make this version of the characters feel slightly different from their comic book counterparts. Another thing that stands out when re-watching Age of Ultron is how different it feels from the first Avengers. The first Avengers had this very specific energy and style, whereas Age of Ultron feels noticeably darker. It's more serious, more emotional, and spends far more time exploring the psychological effects of being a superhero. Whether that's a positive or a negative will probably depend on your perspective, but it certainly helps the movie stand apart from its predecessor. Part of me wishes it had a little more of the original film's tone and identity, but at the same time, I appreciate that Marvel didn't simply make Avengers 1.5. They tried something different, and I think that deserves credit. One of the strongest elements of the movie is that Tony Stark unintentionally creates the villain. It's a really logical continuation of his character arc. Ever since the Battle of New York, Tony has been terrified of what's out there and how vulnerable Earth really is. His solution is to create what he calls a suit of armor around the world. His intentions are good. He's trying to protect humanity, but as we've seen countless times throughout science fiction, good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes. Instead, he creates Ultron, a highly intelligent artificial intelligence that concludes humanity itself is the problem. What makes Ultron such an effective villain isn't simply his strength, it's his intelligence, his unpredictability, and the fact that he's constantly evolving. Every time the Avengers think they've gained an advantage, Ultron adapts, which means the team never truly feel in control of the situation. And when Ultron first awakens and begins attacking Jarvis, the tone shifts dramatically. There's something genuinely unsettling about those scenes. The broken movements, the distorted voice, the way he immediately concludes that humanity itself is the problem, all adds to that feeling. For a franchise that often balances serious moments with humour, those scenes feel surprisingly dark. And honestly, considering how much AI has evolved in the real world since 2015, some of those moments feel even more uncomfortable today. Back then it felt like science fiction, now it feels slightly less impossible, which is both funny and mildly concerning at the same time. Of course, a huge reason Ultron works is James Spader. His voice performance is brilliant. He manages to make Ultron funny, intelligent, sarcastic, and threatening all at once. Do I think he's as iconic as Loki? No. Loki remains one of the MCU's greatest villains, but Ultron is still an excellent antagonist who deserves more appreciation than he gets, which is why I'm happy he is returning for the Vision Quest series on Disney+. Speaking of things that deserve more appreciation, I've never understood the criticism aimed at the Bruce Banner and Natasha Romanoff relationship. Personally, I think it makes complete sense because Bruce and Natasha have more in common than people often give them credit for. They're both carrying enormous emotional baggage, both feel isolated in different ways, and both struggle with the idea of having a normal life. Because of that, it feels believable that they would find comfort and understanding in one another. It's not my favourite MCU romance, but I certainly don't think it's anywhere near as bad as some people make it out to be. One of my favourite moments in the entire film is the now famous party scene. It's great seeing the Avengers simply being people for a change. They're laughing, relaxing, trying to lift Thor's hammer, and then comes the moment. Captain America manages to move Thor's hammer ever so slightly. The look on Thor's face is absolutely priceless. It's hilarious, but it's also a brilliant tease. Comic fans have wanted to see whether Cap was worthy for years, and this scene planted that seed long before Endgame finally paid it off. And while we're talking about Endgame, rewatching these MCU films now is fascinating. There are so many lines that seemed insignificant at the time but mean so much more today. That's the end game. We'll lose, so we'll do that together too. I don't think Marvel knew that this would play into the future movies, but moments like that hit differently now because we know where the story eventually goes. Another aspect of the film that I think deserves more appreciation is Clint's farm. One of the reasons the first Avengers worked so well is because it takes time to let the characters simply exist outside of the action. And Age of Ultron does something similar with the farm sequence. Not only does it give the movie a chance to breathe after several huge action scenes, but it also reminds us what's actually at stake if the Avengers fail. I love the reveal that Clint has a wife and family. It instantly adds another layer to his character. Suddenly Hawkeye isn't just a guy with a bow and arrow alongside gods and super soldiers. He's a husband, a father, and he's fighting because he has something worth protecting. The farm also leads into the introduction of Vision, who is one of the coolest additions in the MCU. Vision is a character that on paper sounds like he shouldn't work at all. He's an android powered by an Infinity Stone who can fly, phase through walls and fire energy beams from his forehead, yet somehow Marvel manages to make him feel believable almost immediately. And a huge reason for that is one simple moment. He picks up Thor's hammer. The moment Vision lifts it, every character in the room immediately trusts him. It's such a clever piece of storytelling. If he's worthy enough to lift Thor's hammer, that's all we need to know. Another small role that leaves a big impression is Ulysses Klaue, played by Andy Serkis. He's only in the movie briefly, but Serkis is fantastic as always, and it's no surprise that Marvel brought him back for the Black Panther movie. And then we get what is probably the standout action sequence of the entire film, the Hulkbuster fight. Watching Iron Man and Hulk tear through an entire city while Tony desperately tries to stop his friend is pure blockbuster entertainment, and exactly the kind of spectacle fans were hoping for. As the movie heads towards its finale, I really like the scene where the team suits up for the final battle. Everyone feels exhausted, everyone feels desperate, and the stakes are enormous. I do think, however, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch have some of the weakest costume designs in the MCU, especially Quicksilver, who genuinely looks like he's on his way to a training session. That said, I think Aaron Taylor Johnson deserves more credit. I've always liked his performance, and it's a shame we don't get more of him in the MCU. One of the best character moments belongs to Hawkeye. People constantly joke about Clint being the weakest Avenger, but moments like his conversation with Wanda prove exactly why he's so important. When she's terrified and unsure of herself, Clint is the one who gives her the confidence to step forward and become a hero. That kind of courage is every bit as important to what Thor or Hulk bring to the team. The spinning team shot isn't as iconic as the first Avengers, but seeing the expanded roster fighting together is still incredibly cool. The final battle is just relentless. The Avengers, Ultron, Vision, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and the countless drones all colliding in one enormous action sequence. And from that point onwards, the film barely stops to catch its breath. It's just non-stop action right through to the finish. Overall, Avengers Age of Ultron is a film that I generally think has improved with age. Will it ever top the original Avengers? No. The story is messier, Loki remains the stronger villain, and there are moments where the film feels like it's working overtime to set up Marvel's future. But what Age of Ultron does exceptionally well is develop these characters beyond simply being a team of heroes. It explores their fears, their flaws, their relationships, and the consequences of the choices they make, giving the film a far more emotional depth than it often gets credit for. For me, Avengers Age of Ultron is an easy 4 out of 5. Not as good as the original, but still a highly enjoyable blockbuster that deserves far more appreciation than it receives. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this review, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.